A few weeks ago, and I've been waiting to tell you this, and for some reason Brother Nelson Guy did not tell it. It's the only time he's been here and the only time he ministered on a Wednesday night, just coming back from Singapore. And I thought surely he would tell his testimony, and I've been waiting to tell it ever since he left, which is a number of weeks now. And now I know why I wasn't to tell it, because it was for this service. Amen. Brother Nelson Guy's wife was terribly ill. She was a dying woman some years ago. I think about 7 years ago. And she began to deteriorate. She was just around, I think when well, some of the people from the assembly, Sister Roxanne probably would know better, but I think she must have been around 39 or 40 when she began to become deathly sick. And she had a Crohn's disease. It was discovered she had Crohn's, which are perforations in the intestine. And you eventually, the intestine is not able to take and give and send the nourishment to the rest of the body. And she reduced down to a dying state. And we received word here. And they called everywhere for people to pray that God would preserve her. And Brother Nelson Guy told me that she remained strong. And, you know, she's a small woman. She remained strong and in faith that God was going to heal her. Had everyone praying, and he was taking her everywhere that he could to get the best specialists, the best doctors that he could. And finally just grasping at straws, and he said she wasted to nothing. And finally she gave up. And that really, he knew it was all over when she lost hope. She was in such pain, and she was so sick and so wasted away, so near death, she gave up. She said, I just have no desire to remain any longer. And in desperation, he just grasping at straws. There was a doctor he'd heard about down in the States, so he thought he would take her down there, and he was kind of a naturopath or something. And he stopped on the way and stopped by Brother Lee Vale's house and was speaking with him. Brother Vale saw Brother Nelson Guy's wife, and he said, she's dying. He said, it's right, I know. And he said, what are you doing? Well, he said, I'm taking her over to a certain doctor. He's kind of a naturopath. And he said, that isn't who she needs. He said, you know, that'll never do. And he mentioned a certain doctor's name to him that is in Mexico. And of course there are a lot of things that I suppose that are, you know, people are operating in different countries because they cannot operate in the United States or Canada. And so anyway, he said, you should call him. It is that this doctor is elderly. He was 84 years old at the time. And he's a German doctor. He actually was working in Germany during the Second World War, and he was studying, and I do not know just under what auspices, but it was under the German government at that time, and he was studying cells because they were seeking to have the highest form of life, the highest form of a human race. And this is what he was studying, human cells and living cells. And perhaps I'm not wording this exactly right, but you'll get the picture. So Brother Nelson Guy called this doctor, and I'm sorry, his name escapes me just now. And he said, I've been given your name. And he said, my wife is very, very ill. He said, in fact, my wife's at the point of death. She's ready to die. He said, what's the matter with her, son? He said, well, she's dying from Crohn's disease. Oh, he said, just a piece of cake, just a piece of cake. He said, bring her down. He said, just a piece of cake to us down here. Oh, he said, just a second, doctor. He said, I've had her everywhere. We've had her to the best. And he said, how can you say that? Oh, he said, it's nothing to us. He said, just bring her down. Well, he said, what are you using? What do you do? He said, he said, we're experienced, we specialize in cells. He said, what we do, we take the unborn fetus of an animal. And he said, at 3 months, that fetus has 100% immunity. And he says, and we take and draw the cells off the various parts of the body. We draw brain cells off. We draw kidney cells off. We draw liver cells off. And we store and keep these cells. And then we inject those cells, depending on what disease the person has, we inject those cells into the afflicted person. Brother Nelson Guy said, he said, just a moment. He said, I'm afraid I couldn't subject my wife to allow you or any doctor to inject animal cells into my wife. Well, he said, it's fine, but he said, that's what we do. He said, you better let me, Brother Nelson Guy said, you better let me think about it, and I'm going to take my wife home. And he said, what will this cost? He said, $5,000 for the first treatment. And, but he said, if you decide to, you bring it down. You bring her down. So Brother Nelson Guy went home, and you can imagine now, here's a pastor. His wife's perhaps 39 or 40 years old, and she's leaving him, literally slipping out from between his fingers. He goes home, and he's in serious prayer before God as he had been. And he doesn't even know exactly how it happened, but he opened up and he was reading in the church age book. And he comes across this paragraph. And I quote, in the Ephesian church age, in the church age, Brother Branham speaking on page 102. Brother Branham says, now I want to go into some certain proof we have that there is a definite affinity between man and animal. It is a physical thing. Do you know that you can, this is 1960. Do you know that you can take the embryo cells from an unborn fetus and inject them into human beings? Then those thyroid cells will go right to the human thyroid. The kidney cells will go right to the human kidney. He said, do you realize how stupendous this is? Some intelligence, this is a prophet. See? This just isn't a medical doctor, this is a prophet. Speaking for the author of all science. Some intelligence guides those animal cells exactly to the right place. And that intelligence accepts those cells and puts them exactly in the right place. There is an affinity between animal and man. They can't intermingle and reproduce. That has been tried. But back in the garden, that intermingling did take place. And soon as he read that, he called the doctor up. He said, I'm going to bring my wife. He said, fine. He said, under one condition, and that is that you treat her personally. He said, I will. He brought her down. He said, when he got to the clinic, the waiting room was filled. He said, there's movie stars. The wealthy of the earth were there waiting. And he said, the doctor told him, now for several days, I'm going to give your wife mega quantities of vitamin to build her up and to cleanse her as much as possible. And then we'll begin the injection process, which he did. And he injected the particular cells into this woman's body, Sister Nelson Guy, a believer of this message, based on what Brother Branham said. But before he did that, Brother Nelson Guy said to the doctor, you know why I'm allowing this? He said, we had a prophet in this generation And he took the church age book. He said, I'd like you to hear what he said he said, I'd like you to hear what he said. And he read this paragraph that I read to you, to this doctor. And the doctor said, when did he say that? He said, about 1960. He said, that's just when we perfected it. So he said, the doctor, go ahead. And the doctor went with his process. After 30 days, Brother Nelson Guy told me I didn't even know my wife in 30 days. And he says, I got a picture of her. So he went into his billfold and he had a whole lot of pictures and things, and he was going through his different, and he just handed one picture out, and he was standing there. He was sitting there, and a young lady, I would say a young lady standing beside him, and I thought it was his daughter. You know, at first glance she could have been 18, she could have been 20, and then I studied her real close, and because I was waiting for the picture for his wife. And I looked at her, and then I thought, well, you know, Brother Nelson Guy is not too far off of my age. She may be 28. I've got children 36, 37. She may be, you know, 30, 28, 29, 30. So I was waiting for the picture for his wife. I said, where's the picture of your wife? He said, that's her. I thought maybe this is his second wife. I said, how old is she? He says, 47. And she looked younger than Joanne. Long dark hair hanging down, standing beside him. And I looked at that picture and I felt strangely moved. I said, how long ago? He said, that picture's taken about 5 years ago. And this is taken after she was made well. And he had a chance to speak and to witness to this doctor of a message and a messenger. Now imagine the finest in Germany, under the sponsorship of the German government, studying in the most advanced position of cells. But a prophet can peer straight back to the garden and see that intermingling and declare, thus saith the Lord. And even say there's an intelligence that will guide the thyroid to the thyroid. And that's precisely what they did these thousands of years later, is take those precise cells and inject that cell. And he said, and here Brother Branham saying, and that intelligence will guide that cell to that part of that body. And they're lined up there for it.